take a look at our next topic for the evening, which is looking at planning and preparation. And you know, when I was in college, I studied to become a teacher, and one of my education classes, the professor stated very bluntly that when it comes to effective teaching, that planning and preparation make up 70% of the total act of teaching a lesson. And I got to tell you, I was just blown away when I heard that. I really thought that, you know, planning and preparation was just a little bit of what you did, and then you went in there and, you know, 90% of the total lesson was what you did in the classroom. And here he was teaching us, and I believe this. I've hung on to this notion for over 30 years now, that 70% of the total act is something that happens before we even set foot in that classroom. And when you get down to it, probably 95% or more of us catechists are not professional teachers and have not received any training in being a teacher and doing the kind of planning and preparation that teachers are trained to do. So we need to spend a little time with that this evening and offer you some help in the area of planning and preparation. So the first thing that I would like to emphasize is the fact that before you begin planning any single lesson, you got to take a look at the big picture, long-range planning. You know, the fact is that the lesson that you're planning is really only part of a larger plan for the entire year. So you want to make sure that you get a picture of the whole calendar year and see how much time that you have to carry out what you hope to accomplish, and try to get a good feel for how one particular lesson can build off of your previous ones and lay the foundation for the upcoming year as well. So be sure to talk to your DRE about getting a calendar for the entire year and doing some long-range planning. But the next thing that I recommend, and I strongly recommend this, is that you just take some time to sit down and read the student's textbook. Just read through it in a nice, thorough way to kind of get to know your textbook's philosophy, its strategies, its approaches, and its strengths and weaknesses, and try to get a sense of the whole book, but then you can zero in on a particular lesson or a chapter or a unit, and you know, see how each lesson sort of fits in with the whole book. Now, the fact that I'm telling you to read the whole textbook doesn't mean that that's all you're going to do is teach from a textbook. It's going to be an important part of what we do, but we're going to see in just a few minutes how it's just a resource for us, but we have lots of different activities at our fingertips, and we want to take advantage of those. The next thing that I recommend that you do is then go through your catechist manual. And the fact is that I think the catechist manual is often the catechist's best friend, well, aside from me, of course. But, you know, most catechetical texts today have excellent catechist manuals, and they lay out the lesson kind of like a blueprint, and they offer step-by-step instructions that you can follow. So the more that you familiarize yourself with the teacher notes in your catechist manual, the better that you're going to be able to implement each of the lessons and still leave room for spontaneity. It's kind of a paradox of planning and preparation. The more you plan and the more you prepare, the more spontaneous you're going to be able to be. So planning doesn't make you rigid. It's actually quite the opposite. Now, I really think that one of the biggest problems that I find catechists falling into is that they simply try to do too much. I think they're trying to teach too many concepts at one time. So, you know, I think a lot of us feel as though it's our responsibility to impart the entire catechism of the Catholic Church in the 1 hour that we have. And you need to know that you have permission to not do everything. You don't have to cover the whole book. I really would recommend that the guiding principle that you go by with each week is asking yourself this question: what is the big idea? You should really be able to try to state it in one sentence, your big idea for that evening. What is the one big thing that you want your students to be able to come away with? And when you latch on to that big idea, then you can come at it from a variety of ways, from lots of different angles, all of them reinforcing that one big idea. And I said that you should try to state that in one sentence. The fact is that when you do that, what you are stating is called a learning outcome. So that one sentence goes something like this: as a result of this session, participants will be able to, and then you need to fill that in with your big idea. They're going to be able to know something. They're going to be able to do something. They're going to be able to be something. So this is what we mean by a learning outcome. And let's take a closer look at this idea. Now, this is a page from the Catechist Manual for the Finding God program. It's one of the two excellent catechetical programs that Loyola Press offers, the other one being Christ Our Life. And this page from the Catechist Manual can be found in every chapter, and it's called the Get Ready Guide. Now, most catechist manuals, no matter what publisher you're using, have a page that looks something like this. And what it does is it summarizes in a nutshell what you're doing in that one class. And I'd like to call your attention to two things in particular. The first one, you can see I just put a red circle around, is the word outcomes. So I said that those are the learning outcomes. These are the big ideas that you're trying to teach. And if you can look closely under that column, you'll see that for each segment of the class, it basically says that at the end of this session, the children should be able to, and then it completes the sentence with your big ideas. But the second thing I want to draw your attention to are the steps that take place in a lesson. You know, there's a real flow to a catechetical lesson. We call it the catechetical process. And you can see I put that set of brackets next to the steps. Most catechetical programs follow 3 or 4 steps. Finding God has 4, and you can see they are engage, explore, reflect, and respond. And what you do with these steps is, well, in fact, I'm going to offer an image that I think can help you see what these steps really do. St. Ignatius taught us that when you're teaching other people, you should really try to enter through their door, but be sure to leave through your door. And what he's saying is that in that flow, the different steps of the lesson, that we start by taking our learners where they're at. We enter into their world, but then we begin to move them towards the gospel and what the gospel is teaching them and how the gospel is going to shed light on their lived experience. So I'll give you an example. I've been teaching 8th graders for a number of years, and I usually begin my classes with those kids by either bringing in some type of contemporary music for them to listen to, or a segment of a TV show, or at least a reference to a television show, or perhaps a current movie or a segment from a movie on DVD that I can show them, or something from the world of sports. I'm always trying to bring in something that is right in front of their noses. That's their door. And after I hook them with that experience, then I move them towards teaching how the gospel speaks to that particular experience we were just talking about. So what you need to do is, when you're preparing to hook them with some type of reference from their lives, make sure that it has something to do with and in some way illustrates the point you're about to make. So, for example, if my lesson is going to be about trusting in God our Father, then I'm going to begin by finding a song or a clip from a movie or something that has to do with the issue of trust. So enter through their door, but don't hang around there. You basically want to begin moving in another direction and leaving through your door so that by the end of class, you have basically, in a way, changed them. You're leading them to conversion, taking them at one point, but now leading them to another point. Let me offer a couple more pieces of advice for planning and preparation before we pause and take some questions. So by all means, start sending in those questions, and in about 3 or 4 minutes, we're going to be pausing to begin looking at some of those. The first thing that I recommend as part of your preparation is to visualize yourself teaching that particular lesson. In other words, use your imagination to picture yourself going through the flow of that lesson. Try to get a feel for how long each segment is going to take. Try to imagine every possible scenario that you might come up. Jot down any thoughts or details that come to mind. Visualizing is a very powerful thing. I can tell you that I visualized this webinar 3 times within the last couple of weeks. One being an actual rehearsal, but then 2 other times just sitting down with my notes and actually visualizing going through this entire webinar. So in a sense, I kind of feel like I have taught tonight's lesson 3 times already, and so I don't feel like this is the first time. So it helps me to relax. The second piece of advice that I'd like to recommend is organizing your materials. You want to be sure that you have everything that you need to complete your lesson properly. There's really nothing worse than reaching a point in your lesson where you tell your participants to cut out pictures from a magazine only to find that you don't have any scissors. I mean, it's those kind of things that can really drive a catechist crazy, but most often it's our own fault because we didn't organize ahead of time. And then finally, the last piece of advice I'd like to offer is the notion of over-planning. It really is good to have options available. Always come planned and prepared with more than you think you're going to need. There's nothing worse for a catechist than teaching a lesson that you thought was going to take 45 minutes and realizing that in 10 or 15 minutes you're done with it. And now you have 30 minutes left. What am I going to do for 30 minutes with these kids? So always have option B, option C, and D, E, F, G, and so on ready to continue on. The reason I have the picture of all those shoes there, it's kind of an inside joke for myself. When my wife and I go on vacations, she very often will pack quite a few shoes. And I ask her, I'll say, what's with all the shoes? And she says, you never know what pairs you're going to need when you're on vacation. And I really think that is what we're talking about here with over-planning. You never know. So, toss some extra ideas into that teacher suitcase of yours when you go to teach your lesson. Have a few things to fall back on, because it's going to happen. You're going to find yourself needing to reach into that bag of tricks. By the way, at the end of this webinar, I'm going to give some information about how you can download a PDF that's titled 11 Tips for Lesson Planning. And it'll have some of the ideas that I shared with you and some other new ideas. And it'll be something you can have in print that you can take with you and look over as you prepare for your first lessons.